In this video, we're going to look at eukaryotes. So, how does organelle structure affect its function? As a review, remember, all cells have the following organelles: plasma membrane, cytoplasm, ribosomes, DNA. Every single cell has these. So what's a eukaryote? Eu means true. These are cells that have evolved from prokaryotes. And they represent everything except bacteria. Animals, plants, protists, so human beings, everything that's not a bacteria that's alive is a eukaryote. And this is kind of how we think it happened. You had two prokaryotes, and this is called endosymbiosis, meaning that they created a symbiotic relationship when one took the other one in. So you have two prokaryotes, and one of them ate the other one, but instead of digesting it, they created a symbiotic relationship and the first eukaryote. And we'll talk about this a little bit more along the way about why we think this is the way things happened. So what are eukaryotes like? Well, they can be unicellular, but they can also be multicellular. They're much larger than bacteria, or than prokaryotes. They're much more complex. And eukaryotes have membrane-bound organelles. So, pro have no, you do. Very important to remember that. So what are the organelles that are in eukaryotes? Well, we're going to start out with the cell wall. The cell wall is not found in animals, and it goes on the outside of plant cells, and it's made of cellulose. Remember, that's a carbohydrate. Now let's look at the membrane-bound organelles. So remember, this means that they have a membrane around them. And we're going to talk about four of them: the nucleus, mitochondria, chloroplast, and the vacuole. So all four of these have a membrane around them. All right? Very important to remember. So, membrane-bound organelles we just listed. What are the non-membrane-bound organelles? Plasma membrane. True, it is a membrane, so we're not calling it a membrane-bound organelle. The cytoplasm, it's just fluid. Ribosomes don't have their own membrane. And the cell wall. So we have four non-membrane bound and four membrane bound organelles. And everything on that side but the cell wall, every single cell. Alright, so first we're going to look at the nucleus. It's got its membrane, and I think of the nucleus as the boss, because it holds the DNA, and the DNA is what tells every other thing in the cell what to do. Now, in a eukaryote, notice that the DNA is linear, and that's different than a prokaryote, because remember, prokaryotes have circular DNA, eukaryotes have linear, or a line DNA. Mitochondria. Notice these actually have two membranes. And they're the powerhouse of the cell. This is what makes energy in the cell. And one of the things that's interesting about mitochondria is they actually have their own DNA. And it's circular, because we're pretty sure they used to be bacteria. And ancient cells, when they took these in as food, didn't digest them, created that symbiotic relationship, and so now inside your eukaryotic cell you have ancient prokaryotes, and that's how we developed these eukaryotes. Chloroplasts also have multiple membranes, and chloroplasts make food. They're only in plants and some protists, and they do photosynthesis. And what's interesting about both of these is they both are actually former prokaryotes. But notice they have very folded membranes. And this is important because in both of them, important reactions occur. And these reactions occur on the membrane. So the more surface area you have, the more reaction you can have. And that's why they have these very folded membranes. Next, the vacuole. So the vacuole is basically just a fluid-filled sac that's surrounded by a membrane. And what it does is it stores food and water for the cells. And the main thing is it's found in all eukaryotes, but it's a little bit bigger in plants. Alright, so now let's kind of build an animal cell. So we have a membrane, because all cells have membranes. All cells have a cytoplasm. They all have ribosomes. So all these little dots, these blue dots, these are the ribosomes. Eukaryotes have a nucleus, so that's a membrane-bound organelle. Mitochondria to produce energy. And a vacuole to store food and water. These are the main parts of an animal cell. Plant cells start with all of those same things. But then they add a cell wall on the outside and chloroplasts. So the only real difference between a plant cell and an animal cell are plant cells have chloroplasts because they do photosynthesis and a cell wall. So now real quick, if we kind of compare prokaryotes and eukaryotes, they both have plasma membranes, cytoplasm, ribosomes, at least some examples of them, both have cell walls, and they all have DNA. Prokaryotes are unicellular, whereas eukaryotes are uni and multicellular. Prokaryotes are very small, very simple, and have no membrane-bound organelles. Eukaryotes are larger, more complex, and do. Prokaryotes, only bacteria. Eukaryotes, everything else. So if you got that down, you pretty much got this.